There are millions of people who drink coffee every morning. But very few people look at a cup of coffee and see a dream. Howard Schultz did. Before Starbucks became one of the most recognizable brands in the world, Schultz was just a kid growing up in a poor neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. He didn't come from money. He didn't have a powerful family behind him. And he certainly didn't have a clear path to becoming a billionaire businessman. What he had was something much more important. A dream. Howard Schultz was born on July 19, 1953, in Brooklyn. His family lived in a small apartment, and money was always tight. His father, Fred, worked different blue-collar jobs to support the family. Then one day, something happened that would stay with Howard for the rest of his life. His father was injured while working. There was no comfortable safety net waiting for the family. No big savings. No financial security. Howard watched his family struggle. And as a child, he began to understand something that would later shape the way he ran his company. People deserve to be treated with dignity. Howard became determined to build a different kind of future for himself. He worked hard in school and eventually earned a football scholarship to Northern Michigan University. He became the first person in his family to graduate from college. After college, Howard worked different jobs, trying to find his place in the world. Then, in the early 1980s, he discovered a small coffee company in Seattle called Starbucks. At the time, Starbucks wasn't the global empire we know today. It was just a handful of stores selling coffee beans. Howard became fascinated by the company. But his real inspiration came during a trip to Italy. While visiting Milan, he walked into an Italian coffee bar and noticed something completely different. People weren't simply buying coffee. They were talking, laughing, reading, connecting. The coffee shop felt like part of the community. Howard suddenly had an idea. What if coffee shops in America could become places where people didn't just grab a drink and leave? What if they could become a third place? Not home, not work, somewhere in between. A place where people could slow down, connect, and feel like they belonged. Howard returned to America with the idea burning inside him. But there was a problem. The people running Starbucks didn't immediately share his vision. They were focused on selling coffee beans. Howard wanted to build something much bigger. Eventually, he left Starbucks and started his own coffee company, which he called Il Giornale. It was risky. He didn't have unlimited money. He had to convince investors to believe in him. And that wasn't easy. He reportedly faced rejection after rejection while trying to raise money. Imagine walking into room after room, telling people about your dream. And hearing no, again, and again, and again. But Howard kept going. Eventually, he raised enough money to move forward. Then came the moment that changed everything. In 1987, Howard Schultz and his investors purchased Starbucks. The small Seattle coffee company became the foundation of the vision he had been carrying for years. And Howard began transforming Starbucks. He wanted the stores to feel warm. He wanted employees to feel respected. He wanted customers to feel welcome. And most importantly, he wanted Starbucks to become more than a coffee company. He wanted it to become an experience. The company expanded rapidly. One store became dozens. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands. And eventually, Starbucks became a global phenomenon. But Howard never forgot where he came from. He remembered his father. He remembered watching his family struggle. And he remembered what it felt like to have no safety net. That's why he became known for investing heavily in employee benefits, including healthcare and stock ownership programs for many workers. His philosophy was simple. If you take care of your people, they will take care of your customers. But Howard's journey wasn't always smooth. In 2000, he stepped away from the CEO position. And while he was gone, Starbucks continued growing. But eventually, the company began facing serious problems. The financial crisis hit. Stores were struggling. The brand was losing some of its identity. Customers were noticing. And Howard watched from the outside. Then, in 2008, he returned as CEO. This was not the triumphant return people imagine. Starbucks was hurting. Howard knew that simply opening more stores wasn't going to fix the problem. Something deeper had to change. So Starbucks made a difficult decision. It temporarily closed thousands of stores across the United States to retrain baristas. That decision was expensive, but Howard believed Starbucks had to remember what made it special in the first place. Coffee, people, connection, and quality. Slowly, the company began recovering. The stores became stronger, the brand became stronger, and Starbucks continued expanding around the world. But perhaps the most powerful part of Howard Schultz's story isn't the billions of dollars, the thousands of stores, or the global success. It's the reason he wanted to succeed in the first place. Howard once experienced what it felt like to watch someone he loved struggle without protection. And instead of allowing that pain to define him, he used it to create his philosophy. He wanted to build the kind of company his father never had. A company where people could have opportunities. A company where employees could feel valued. A company where a person could walk through the doors and feel like they belonged. That's why Howard Schultz's story isn't really about coffee. It's about belonging. It's about seeing something ordinary and imagining something extraordinary. It's about hearing, no, and continuing anyway. And it's about remembering where you came from after you finally make it. Howard Schultz didn't start with millions of dollars. He started with a childhood dream, a college degree, an idea from a trip to Italy, and the courage to keep going when people doubted him. Today, when someone walks into a Starbucks and orders a coffee, they might not think about the young boy from Brooklyn who once watched his family struggle. But that boy never disappeared. He carried his past with him. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson in Howard Schultz's journey. You don't have to come from greatness to create something great. Sometimes, the hardest chapters of your childhood become the reason you build something meaningful later in life. Howard Schultz saw a cup of coffee. But he also saw a place where people could connect. He saw opportunity. He saw community. He saw a future. And most importantly, he saw a dream worth fighting for.